The forest had 47 names. Different species, across different centuries, had looked at the dark wall of twisted canopy on the southern edge of Thesval IV's third continent and arrived, independently, at the same conclusion, that whatever lived inside, it was not something they wished to negotiate with, and had named it accordingly. The Vahari called it Velshan Doru, the place that eats. The Kethari Survey Corps had designated it Exclusion Zone Crimson, which was their highest threat classification, reserved for things like active volcanic calderas and the nesting grounds of the void serpents of Mreth. The Gorian Collective had no name for it because they had taken one look at the sensor readings during their initial survey and collectively decided that some places did not require names, only distance. 14 separate xenobiological expeditions had attempted entry over 3 centuries. 11 had turned back within the first 100 meters. 2 had lost personnel. 1 had never been heard from again. The Joint Research Station's safety protocols were very clear on the subject. The forest was off-limits. The forest was categorically, absolutely, non-negotiably off-limits. There was a fence, a real one, not a symbolic one, reinforced polyalloy with electromagnetic deterrent capability. And beyond the fence there were 3 warning signs in 22 languages, and beyond the signs there was a buffer zone of 200 meters that no one was supposed to enter even without going past the fence. This information was in the orientation packet. Every new arrival received the orientation packet. Senior xenobiologist Soraya had been at the station for 6 years. She had read the orientation packet. She had written parts of the orientation packet. She had personally updated the Forbidden Beast Forest section after the incident with the Gorian research assistant who had tried to collect a soil sample from the buffer zone and had needed 3 weeks of medical care and a significant amount of therapy afterward. She understood the forest, which was why, when she looked out the window of the Eastern Monitoring Station at noon and saw a human crouching at the tree line, inside the fence, inside the buffer zone, inside the absolute perimeter of no, her first response was not alarm. It was a very specific, very tired kind of resignation. "Ronan," she said to the maintenance technician who was replacing a sensor panel behind her, "is that your colleague?" Ronan looked up, looked out the window, and winced. "That's Darian," he confirmed. "What?" Soraya said carefully. "Is Darian doing?" Ronan squinted. "Looks like he's setting something up." "Is that?" "Yeah, that's a camp stove." Soraya turned to look at him. "A camp stove. He does this." Ronan returned to his sensor panel with the manner of someone describing a colleague's mildly inconvenient but familiar habit. When he gets curious about something, he goes and sits near it for a while. Says it helps him think. A pause. Also, he probably didn't eat breakfast. He forgets. Soraya looked back at the window. Darian, she didn't know him well. He'd only been at the station for 3 weeks. Another maintenance tech was now fully crouched at the edge of the tree line with what appeared to be a small portable stove, a pan, and a bag that probably contained food. He had his back to the forest. He was not looking at the forest. He appeared to be reading something on a small datapad while waiting for the stove to heat up. He had his back to the forest. "I need to go out there," Soraya said. "Probably," Ronan agreed. The walk to the buffer zone took 4 minutes. The walk through the buffer zone to where Darian had set up his impromptu kitchen took another 2, and during those 2 minutes Soraya became aware of several things simultaneously. The first was that the forest was watching. This was not a metaphor. The eastern tree line was home to at least 4 documented apex species, including the Velcroft population that the research station studied, 2 varieties of something that the xenobiology team had classified only as ambush predators, large, do not approach, and an entity in the deeper forest that had shown up on thermal imaging as a heat signature roughly the size of a transport vehicle and had not yet been classified at all because no one had been willing to get close enough to try. The tree line, this afternoon, was very still, the kind of still that meant things were in it, not moving and choosing not to move. The second thing Soraya became aware of was that Darian did not seem to notice this. He was a tall human, lean, with the kind of easy physicality that suggested he spent time outdoors by preference rather than requirement. He had dark hair that needed cutting, a jacket with too many pockets, and the expression of someone genuinely absorbed in whatever he was reading. His camp stove had reached temperature. He was adding something to the pan. It smelled, absurdly, like garlic, with the focused attention of a person who took their lunch seriously. "Darian," Soraya said, keeping her voice very level. He looked up. He had light eyes, gray, she thought, or blue. Humans were hard to read, and they registered her presence with the mild pleasure of someone who didn't mind company. Hey, Soraya, right? You're the lead xenobiologist. He smiled. Want some? I made extra. Soraya looked at the pan, at the tree line, at the utter stillness of the utter stillness. Do you know where you are? She said. Buffer zone, eastern perimeter. He tilted his head toward the forest behind him. Edge of the exclusion zone. It's in the orientation packet. She stared at him. You read the orientation packet. Sure. First thing I do at a new posting. He stirred whatever was in the pan. The garlic smell intensified. Something in the tree line shifted, not aggressively, just a weight redistribution, a thing adjusting its position to see better. Sit down. You're making me anxious hovering like that. I'm making you anxious, Soraya repeated. You've got that look people get when they're about to make me move. I'm comfortable here. He patted the ground next to him with the cheerful authority of someone who had decided that the ground next to him was a good place to sit and expected others to agree. Come on. 5 minutes. Tell me about what's in there. She sat down. She could not, afterward, entirely explain why. Partially because arguing with someone who was already sitting calmly in a place they shouldn't be, making lunch, was a different kind of challenge than the emergencies she had trained for. Partially because the forest was still, and still was better than not still, and some part of her animal brain was trying to tell her something about that. Partially because the garlic genuinely smelled good, and she had also skipped breakfast. The forest has 14 documented apex predator species, she said, for in the eastern quadrant. The tree line you are currently sitting 4 meters from is within pounce range of at least 2 of them. Darian divided the pan's contents onto 2 plates with practiced efficiency. He'd brought 2 plates. He'd brought extra. He had been planning to share, which meant he had been expecting company, which meant, did you know someone would come after you? She asked. Figured someone would notice eventually. He handed her a plate. Eat. What are the 4? Soraya looked at the plate, looked at the tree line, looked at the plate again. She ate. Velcroth, she said. 2 adults, possibly 3. 1 is a breeding female and will be protective. Second, ambush predators we've classified as category unknown do not approach. The big gray ones, with the camouflage skin. She stopped. You've seen them. One came out to look at me for about 20 minutes 2 days ago. He said it the way you might say a neighbor waved at me on my way to work. I stayed still. It stayed still. Then it went back in. He was eating now, unhurried. What are the other 2? A pack species. 6 to 8 individuals. They hunt cooperatively, and they are extraordinarily fast. Soraya found she was eating too, on autopilot, because some part of her body had apparently decided that the situation was manageable and food was available, and therefore normal functions should resume. And the 4th we don't have a classification for. Thermal imaging shows a heat signature of approximately 12 meters, Darian said. She stopped again. He was looking at the tree line now. Not anxiously. Not with the frozen prey stillness that every other species in her experience brought to proximity with the forest. More like, interested. The way a researcher looks at a problem they find genuinely engaging. You've seen the large one, she said flatly. It came to the tree line last night. Around 3rd hour. I was out here with a light. A pause. I think it was curious about the light. You were out here at 3rd hour. Couldn't sleep. I do my best thinking at night. He finished his plate, set it down, rested his arms on his knees in the classic human position of someone completely comfortable in their body and their location. Here's what I've been thinking about. 14 expeditions came in here. 11 turned back right away, right? But the sensor logs from those expeditions, I pulled them. They're technically public record. None of them show attack behavior. They show approach behavior. The predators came to look, and the expedition teams panicked and left. Soraya opened her mouth. The 2 that lost personnel were both teams that ran. Darian continued, and his voice was still calm, still the voice of a man thinking out loud over lunch. I looked at the incident reports. Both times, the predator behavior escalated after the team began rapid retreat. Not before. The forest was very still. Soraya was very still. You're suggesting, she said slowly, that the forest isn't attacking. It's responding. I'm suggesting that we've been labeling it forbidden because we scared ourselves out of it every time we try to go in, and then wrote up the thing that came to look at us as a threat instead of a— He paused, searching for the word. Gatekeeper. Maybe. Or just a neighbor, coming to see who moved in next door. You built this hypothesis, Soraya said, by sitting at the tree line eating lunch. 3 days of lunch, he corrected. And one night. The gray camouflage one came back yesterday. Stayed longer. He picked up the pan to check if there was anything left. There wasn't. He set it back down with mild disappointment. I think if I stay calm, it'll come back again. And I think if it comes back enough times and nothing bad happens, eventually one of the others will come too. Soraya looked at the tree line. Very still. Choosing to be still. 14 expeditions. 11 retreats. 2 casualties, both during panicked withdrawals. 1 team that had never returned. But what if never returned meant something different from what everyone had assumed? What if? I need to check the records on the 14th expedition, she said. The one that disappeared. Darian looked at her sideways. Already did, he said. Their last transmission was calm. No distress signals. They stopped transmitting 7 hours after entry. He paused. 7 hours is a long time to not be in distress. Soraya sat with that for a moment. What do you think happened to them? She asked. Darian shrugged, but his eyes were very thoughtful. I think, he said carefully, that they might have gotten further in than anyone else. And I think that whatever is further in, a gesture toward the deep forest, toward the 12-meter heat signature, toward whatever was beyond what thermal imaging could reach, might be really, really interesting. He stood up, collecting the camp stove with the neat economy of someone who cleaned up after themselves. Same time tomorrow, he said. I'm thinking I'll try cooking something with more aroma. See if I get more visitors. Soraya looked at him, looked at the tree line, at the absolute stillness that was not emptiness but presence, patient, massive, watching, and at the human who had looked at it and seen not a threat, but a conversation waiting to happen, and had responded by making lunch. I'll bring dessert, she said. The first official Forbidden Beast Forest contact log was filed 6 weeks later. Soraya wrote it. Darian was listed as field observer, which was not a real title, so she invented one. Intuitive interspecies liaison, she wrote, and when the review board sent back a query about the classification, she replied with the contact log itself, 17 pages, with photographs. The photographs showed Darian sitting cross-legged at the tree line. They showed the gray camouflage creature, now designated species GC-1, tentatively non-hostile, sitting 4 meters away, watching him. They showed the Velcroth female, the breeding one, who was supposed to be the most dangerous organism in the eastern quadrant, with her head lowered slightly in the posture that Soraya now recognized from her work with Savara as relaxed assessment. And in the last photograph, barely visible at the tree line, a shape. Large, dark, 12 meters, give or take. 2 eyes, catching the light of Darian's camp stove. Looking, just looking. The review board approved the reclassification. The fence came down the following spring.